Gerd is already
Okay.
asking when.
Ready when you are.
Like, coming.
It's on, or it should be on. So
Mhm.
we'll see. At
Mm.
least I told it to start streaming. Hey, look, there it is. It's
Yep.
there. Okay,
Yay! We're live.
we're live again, and we got
Cool.
the three of us in the thing because I can do this from the OBS software, so it's fun. Um, yeah, I'll give it a couple minutes to see if anybody, waited since I was so late to the game here, but I had a class to attend to, so like, but it'll be nice. I can actually see the chit chat on because I'm back on this computer. So one of these days I'll be able to put it on there where we have the chat like on the sidebar and be like all cool looking. Then we
That
all
would
can
be
see
pretty
it.
cool.
Um, but I don't know if anybody caught the title of this. I titled it emergency broadcast.
I think it's fair.
I have to play off of the craziness that's been going on for the last week.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say 3 days, but no, it has been a week, hasn't it?
Yeah. So we decided to come in here and do a little kind of not like house cleaning, but sort of like let's try to clear up some things that have been going on because there's been a lot of confusion with this one. I mean, well, from the coronal hole and its positive polarity configuration, and it drove some pretty good substorming. And then prior to that, the CME that everybody was talking about
CME that never
that
was.
never well, it was,
There was
but it
the G3 that never was.
Was
no.
it though?
Yeah, so it wasn't. I mean, it was more like in line what we would have thought from something from that imagery, but with that imagery being so confusing in that it showed like it was really fast. So it's like from an operational standpoint, I don't think you can discount that even if you think it's weird. Um so I think because of their stakeholders, they had to do what they had to do and put that G3 out there because that is the worst case scenario, and therefore, it's better safe than sorry. So that's kind of
Yeah.
what happened there. It's just a shame that the media ran with it like it did, and the big red donut of doom was everywhere. Um,
Yeah. Well,
Good name for it.
we can actually start with that story. So if you
yeah.
want to share the slides, we can go
Yes. Oh
there.
yeah. I should probably give you all sharing capability here. Oh fuck. No.
Look,
That's not what I wanted to do. I didn't want to
you can
share.
do that too.
I didn't
Nice
want to
moves.
share. I needed to give them all sharing
Well,
capabilities.
Yeah, Tanya, if
let me
you
go
want
to
to,
the
I
slideshow. Yep, absolutely. So, official. Oh, all right. So, we're gonna go with forecasts and coronal holes because we got two coronal holes to cover. One that was previous one, negative polarity, and the positive polarity that we have right now. But that's kind of to the end of the discussion. So we shall start. Well, can we?
Maybe.
Yes.
maybe. Yeah, there
So,
we go.
what actually happened? It was a very interesting event because it started with M1 solar flare on March 21st. It was eruption at the active region, and that actually triggered what's called sympathetic eruption from the filament that was near the center of the disk. If you look at the dimming pattern, you could see it was a complex event. So this is one thing, this is the second thing. Um, that CME that was near center, the dimming pattern was actually fairly slow. It was wide and it was slow. Is it tip off as far as what the CME is going to look like? Well, to some degree, but I think additional studies are needed before operational people actually take it on as an indication. Right now, it's sort of not a thing. Everybody waits for coronagraphs because dimming, they may happen, but the CME may not actually go anywhere. It may just return to sun, no launch. What happened with that? Well, that CME appeared as very faint. I would say probably close to full halo and fairly asymmetric. The speed that was measured, yeah, it was overlapping with the CME, but it appeared a little bit later from the M1 eruption. Um, which kind of complicated things, but not really. Measured speed was super high. So M2M modeling, and I think Karina was on this one.
It was.
It was super fast. Met Office decided to go with like the slower speed, but this comes with a lot of uncertainty, unfortunately, when you don't have stereo A that's looking at the sun from a different perspective. So we're kind of looking at the sun head on. That's Lascaux, that's SOHO, that's a satellite that's sort of staring straight into the sun. We don't have anything right now, at least not at that point. We didn't have anything that was looking at the sun from the side to see where CME was going and how fast it was going. So we had nothing to confirm the speed. Is it a problem? Turned out to be a huge one because it was modeled as fast CME that was also spreading very fast, so narrow and likely as a glancing blow for us. But because it's so fast, you have no choice but to say, okay, that's going to be a strong impact because as it goes, it sort of collects all the magnetic field that's in front of it and all the particles in front of it, sort of acting as a sunplow, and it just rams it into magnetosphere, so that can create a pretty potent punch. So AM2M modeled it as impact on a 23rd, and Huxt, which ran with Met Office mapping of that CME, and you can see it's mapped as fairly wide actually. So we're getting kind of almost like a flank, so sides of it, not exactly a scrape like a glancing blow, but more of a kind of side swipe. It was kind of pushing it out toward the 24th, but the speed was still fairly high, so you'd have to go with a fairly significant impact. Well,
And that probability time frame too, 99%.
yeah, it's gonna hit.
Mention that part.
So
Mm-hmm.
it sure did hit, but where the problem is, you're getting a single point of view. So the wide, slow CME within the same frames will appear as a narrow, fast CME. So speed's gonna look identical. And as operational person, you're probably gonna go with a narrow and fast CME given a choice because that's gonna be more impactful. And that's going to impact the satellites, it's going to impact power grid, and that's how you're going to model it. You're going to assume worst case scenario. Is that correct? Well, it may not be, but again, it's a risk focus forecast, so that's what you're going to get.
It's what we have.
I have data pulled up when you're ready for it.
Hold on. What we ended
Oh,
up
right.
getting is a communication from SWIPSy telling the public that G3 watch is posted. Watch, not a warning, not alert. Again, lots of uncertainty in this one, which probably wasn't communicated very well, but the infographic that was chosen for this event to communicate it was that unfortunate red donut. It got shared over 6,000 times on social media.
The red donut of doom.
And in addition to that, how many people actually grabbed it off SWIPSy from the Aurora dashboard and shared that one, I cannot even tell you. But it got shared plenty. And the effects that were communicated to the public, again, visible over many of the northern states and some of the lower Midwest and Oregon. And it's the UT date, March 23rd. So that actually covers not early, but yeah, it's the evening of the 22nd, technically all the way into March 23rd. So it covers about a day if you think about it. Unfortunately, people were out chasing this. And unfortunately, the uncertainty which you could find in modeling analysis and some of the technical forecasts, that was not included in this communication, that this is actually a very high uncertainty event due to limited imagery, and it was modeled for highest possible impact, which is what you have to do for operations, not for Aurora. So what happened next is pretty telling. We can go, I'm going to stop sharing. We're going to go to solar wind data.
So, in that case, the actual data we saw was a far cry from G3 status. I've got it from about the start. First off, what we began to see was no shocks. There was not an actual increase that would be considered an impulsive shock arrival. It was more like a gentle wave being pushed as slowly stats increased over time. We did see an IMF that hit about 15 nanotesla, I want to say, for a peak value. We had BX being very, very strong for most of these cases, either in the positive or negative direction. And we had a slight period, though, of negative BZ, -6 to -9, where if I'm going to use the KP index just for the sake of giving an accurate analogy of how far it went, we did not even see G1 storming, technically. We did go on for a little bit longer, and then we had I mean, I'll be honest, this could have been something Flux Row B-ish, but the BZ component was so tattered that we basically had a 0 BZ component for most of the duration and a very strong Western field, which, to be fair, didn't help very much. So this was our G3 storm, everybody. How's it look?
It was amazing.
Some good Aurora that night, right? No? Ooh, okay. Sorry, I'm being too sarcastic here.
Well, there was some. It just wasn't.
I mean, there's always some, let's be honest.
I mean,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's true. But
But
it
the
was
point
a
is,
win.
very
It
far
was,
cry from what we
yeah,
expected.
but it was a win for operations and for impacted industries. They're like, oh yeah, G3 didn't comp. That's what we want.
That's right.
That's definitely what I.
Sorry, I was reading the chat. I mean, like, for our high latitude watchers, they still got something cool. Because they always
Which,
do.
of course, they're always spoiled, let's be honest.
Well,
say nothing. It's
people
fine.
were out on the night of the 22nd because um that is technically UTC March 23rd, and some people drove quite
Yeah,
far.
what
I
was
don't
that
know.
one? It was like 568 miles that one person
Yeah,
drove.
yeah, that was a problem.
Yeah. They're like, oopsies.
Yeah, that was a moment. Like, oh, you went out and actually, yeah. And then let's see. So from start to finish for that fun statistic was about 9 hours roughly before IMF strength declined to the point where it's irrelevant for the most part. I would say ambient solar wind kicked in again about that time.
What's this saying?
So likely glancing blow
Yeah, I'll
Yeah.
say
at best.
it's not this. How does this go? It's not the CME that we wanted, but it's the one that we deserve.
God. We were on our worst behavior.
Yeah, that's to say the least, yeah. But we're all, of course, mid to low latitude people, so we might have been a little more angsty than others.
Yep. Very true.
But
All right.
that takes us into what the coronal hole disaster. Well, it's not really a disaster, but it's a sizable coronal hole. I give it that. It's big. Is it the biggest ever? I don't know. Maybe.
No,
According to
absolutely
Twitter,
not.
it is. Or
Okay,
whoever that was. But
shall we go to the slide deck again?
yeah,
Who wants to drive?
Oh, I guess, yeah, I could go ahead and still do that
Yeah.
since
Yeah,
I'm
do
gonna
that.
go back
Bring it up.
anyway.
it's the coronal hole we also deserve.
Mm.
All right, there you go.
All right. So yeah, this was the next thing on deck for all of us, and it's big. I mean, I'll give it that. It's transequatorial, which is nice, but most of it's in the south, and it's a positive polarity. There is some debating going on in some of the chats about the significance of that because we talk about the Russell-McFerrin effect and what that has, and that in a lot of groups give the RM effect a lot more weight than it needs to have. It does affect coronal holes and background solar wind, but CME it doesn't do anything with. So that being said, there's a handy little acronym called SNAP: spring negative, autumn positive, and you reverse the seasons for our friends in the southern hemisphere that are watching. This is the positive polarity hole. So what does that mean? It might not have the kind of impact that it could, but it did some very interesting things because this ended up being quite a fast fast wind stream. So we still got some decent Aurora out of it, even though the BZ was mostly positive. And we'll get to that in a second. I'm trying to go through the notes in my head, the post that I wrote, but it's escaping me. So you can probably go to the next slide.
We can go to here. How about this one?
Yeah. Oh yeah. So yeah, let's talk about what actually happened. So there was a solar sector boundary crossing just preceding this CIR and coronal hole, which caused a little bit of confusion as well, because everybody's on their, pins and needles, like waiting, when is this going to happen? When is this going to happen? And then like you see like these little density, like, it increases in density and whatever. Like, oh, this must be it. But we saw a sector boundary crossing first. And that's when you cross the heliospheric current sheet. Basically, the phi angle goes from, what is this, towards to away.
Negative to positive now.
And you see it clear as day right there in the chart. It went from boof, hey, towards to away. So we crossed that, and that can drive aurora activity, that alone. And that's what happened. So we actually saw that the previous night. Come daytime for North America, unfortunate for us, the CIR actually hit, and that was decently potent. There's an embedded structure can't be ruled out of this, even though we'll probably never be able to decipher that from there, because the density was a bit higher than what you'd expect from a typical CIR or boundary crossing. But why words are escaping me? Help me out here.
You're still, I mean, you got it.
You got it. And the reason the structure was mentioned is there is a little bit of sort of adventure into negative sector in the middle of it. So that might be suggestive that of the embedded structure.
Right.
It may have been not a full-blown CME, but kind of very
pieces
small.
Of one.
Well, the solar sector boundary crossings are very interesting because sometimes there are flux ropes that are thrown in there. They kind of they're shed from that area. If you think about what structure is that, it's literally where the fields are switching, and that often is kind of a little bit of a dense crossing and a slightly higher magnetic strength for that area. So that's why they can drive storming. But this is that helmet streamer belt. So we do see it for eclipses as sort of prolonged wisps that are going off the corona. And sometimes CMEs are seen there, but there could be a small one that got compressed by the CIR, but by sort of fast solar wind that was chasing after it. And when it's compressed, it obviously kind of compounds the IMF, the magnetic strength of it, and there could have been the flux rope in there. There might be some rotation in that mess, but to tell for sure, good luck.
Yeah, actually,
not gonna
I would
happen.
say there's the third possibility of it is a CIR, it is tangled solar wind. It could very easily be solar wind from that negative sector that had become entangled in that part of it. I think that's less likely given how far in it was, but that is another possibility.
Stream interaction region, that's what I was trying to say.
Oh, SIRs. Okay, fair. I can't remember the actual names for them anymore.
Because I'm just trying to remember, like, when you sit here and rattle off all these acronyms everywhere, like, sometimes it's nice to, like, hey, this is what that means, and then I just couldn't remember. Because the CIR is co-rotating interaction region, so that means that this was seen the previous cycle, and this is the second time we're seeing it. If it's the first time we're seeing it, it's an SIR, stream interaction region. So that's the difference between the two. This coronal hole was seen last rotation, but this time it was about, I think in the Glendale app, it said it was like 91% bigger, and I think it might have been. It was huge. Like the whole southern pole basically was a coronal hole. So it's a lot bigger. But I guess if we go on with the solar wind data here, you can see that it was mostly away, which is what we'd expect because it's a positive polarity hole. And then the BZ was mostly positive. So that's where
I will jump to here in that case.
And so if we want to talk about the difference, with the spring and negative, or spring negative, autumn positive, like you can look on the solar wind chart here. The difference. So the negative one, it tends to be a little bit more towards the southern BZ, and then in a mostly positive or positive polarity, it tends to be more northerly. So that is the seasonal aspect to this, and why some certain coronal holes do better in the spring and autumn versus not. So it's an interesting little thing, and it's kind of up for debate. It sort of is. You can find research papers on this where some people say it doesn't have that much of an effect, some people do. But if you look at all the antecedent historical storms, it does favor the equinoxes a bit. So you can't totally discount it. But that's kind of showing the difference between those. And
And of course, this is only in one example case
yeah,
for each. So, it's far from definitive evidence, but the idea is the general trend is still there, and this is applicable for radial fields generally. So CMEs are kind of irrelevant in this case. Their magnetic field dominates regardless.
amen. Okay, you can see what's our next one.
Come back to we can check out the
Oh
actual
yeah.
Aurora stuff
So
if you want on
this
that.
is what happened. It actually
Yeah.
drove a pretty decent amount of activity, despite having a mostly positive BZ, and that's, you know, the nature of substorm chasing. Because you are still gonna you have energy being deposited, shed out. It's just you have a we always like the tipping bucket analogy, where like things just get loaded in and then eventually it tips and it, you know, you get into a substorm expansion. That's kind of what we see here. You have these periodic substorms that were quite decent, um, and you can see them in the peaks there. So it wasn't a total loss, but what was the confusion in the Aurora chasing world is like, hey, how did this happen when you had mostly a positive BZ? The other component to this is having a high IMF, which this, I think,
Go
memory
back to it.
serves, it was around 19 most of the night,
So
something
yeah,
like
I mean,
that.
at peak values hit around almost
Yeah,
35. I think there was a minus 24
yeah,
BZ,
I
the
believe
lowest.
it. And then it kind of like leveled off at like 19, 20 for like most of the night. And
Yeah,
now it's been falling off. But so you combine that high BT with, just regular substorm characteristics or cycles, and you're going to get some activity. You got to be patient though. That's the name of this game, because you don't have that southern BZ push that we normally have. But yeah, it's not a total loss. So
No, and if
I
you
have
want to
no
go back,
patience.
yeah, if you want to go back to the photos of Aurora,
mm-hmm.
there is some interesting Aurora
There
dynamics
was.
too. So, this is Isle Royale. This is one of the dark sky areas in North America. So it's actually very close. Well, it's not as dark as I would like to see because you see the city lights over there, but it's pretty dark and it's pretty decent when it comes to actually showing when aurora is happening. And that was the case last night. So this is earlier in the night when auroral electrojet index is really not showing a whole lot of activity. So this is diffuse aurora. It just shows up as that arc, which is typical. No, actually, that's a lot
Yep.
earlier. Yeah, that's a lot earlier. That's a bit later. So that's
Yeah, these
after that
times
major
here.
substorming. So that time is in Eastern daytime, that timestamp. So
So
that's
we're at
closer to
4. Okay,
midnight. So
Oh, right,
yeah,
before.
right.
we're over there. Yep, exactly.
Oh, actually,
So
that's
there is
worse.
yeah, exactly. There's not much happening, but the system was already revved up from previous activity, so there was energy that didn't quite dissipate, and there was not enough energy from the solar wind that was incoming to really get it to a decent substorm. So you get this diffuse aurora that just sits there, and people say that arc is getting higher in the sky, and it will because we are rotating under that auroral oval. So we're going to see more of it. It's going to rise from sort of northeast and just travel through the sky. But it took some feeding, so to speak, from the solar wind to actually finally get it to substorm. So, but meanwhile, you can get those minor flare-ups where you see a little bit of activity and then it goes back to diffuse, a little bit of activity and then it goes back to diffuse. So people would jump and say, oh, a substorm is happening, but it's very short and it really is not explosive. And from the magnetotail perspective, it remains very stretched out. So it sort of releases just a little bit and goes back to loading phase. Releases just a little bit, goes back to loading phase. So when it finally loads, it kind of breaks, and you see the third photo is actual substorm with full-blown depolarization, and that happened around so about 5:30, that initial substorm.
Yeah, and
The
then
yeah, the
peaking about
electrojet is
6:30.
yeah, yeah, I would say so. So that was a big one. And it It was pretty big because it was overhead in northern Minnesota. So there is another sky cam there, and it's great for checking activity. And it was pretty impressive for northern Minnesota. So I'm pretty sure it was seen pretty far south, at least closer to the equator. If you think about southern hemisphere, that would be your north. But you could see that fairly far. Was there a reaction from magnetometers prior to that big substorm? Not that much, because there is really no current. It's sort of particles are energized, that they're raining down, they're causing this diffuse glow, but you don't see rays. You really don't see typical
In
subauroral features.
fact,
There's just not enough energy to feed it.
I
So,
have the stack plot from that night.
ew.
Actually, wait, is that the 28th or 27th? Oh no,
It was, oh,
You're just
this is
going
27th.
oh, 27th.
like I see it. There it is.
Yeah,
There we go. Yeah,
yep,
that makes more sense here.
that
There.
one. Yeah, and prior to that, magnetometers are really not, we're not doing a whole lot. Yet Aurora was
No,
there.
nothing.
Aurora was definitely there. So it was glowing. It would show up as more of a diffuse, and um I know that people commented that it's not doing much and I'm gonna go home. So even our group was saying that, and trying to tell for sure when it's gonna explode under these conditions, when it's gonna go into substorm is very difficult because BZ is not really, it's not that predictable when it comes to coronal holes. So if you want to go to the solar wind data, the real time, and just limit it to,
Yeah, see
yeah,
where we're at right
it's
now.
like
We're at
BZ is
five.
all over the place.
Yep, we are at a pretty consistent negative BX, which makes sense given the positive polarity. Go figure. And then we're down to still the 700, 750s. So, I mean, there's still going to be Aurora tonight for high
Mhm.
latitude, especially. It's just going to be that same thing for the most part. Occasional bursts, maybe twice over the North American night at most. So, if you want to stay up and get a little bit, feel free. I'm going to bed.
Yep, same.
Density being below 1 per cubic centimeter also makes sense usually. So, this usually looks pretty weird from ACE and Discover both. Discover usually gets some pretty inaccurate readings when we get that type of solar wind. Let's see what it says. Oh yeah,
Same.
it's sitting
Yeah,
in the
same go
three,
for
five.
A's.
None of this is accurate for Discover. So Discover solar wind monitor right now is kaput. It is not going to work as long as we have these high speeds. ACE is accurate.
Isn't
So
yeah, that's crazy to see
Yeah,
the
and even
difference.
ACE will struggle under those conditions when the density is very low.
yeah, sub
Some of
one is
that's why
usually the issue.
it's yeah, that's why it's marked as error and suspect and density low, and those error markings become critical.
Yay.
So yeah,
Yeah,
possible
yeah. I
Aurora,
think that's everything.
I think that's
but
everything. I think
not
so.
much.
Yeah, Vincent's like both have bad data. I know lately it's been really well, and then there's the whole thing we discovered about them not being sometimes not very close to each other and can read different things. But that can be a subject for another day because that's an interesting development, um, especially for us Aurora chasers, where that 5 nanotesla difference can actually make a difference. Not so much on the operations end; they don't really care that much. But for us, it could, like depending on which satellite you're looking at and which data is actually being seen here, um, that was an interesting little discovery to find out. So that'll be a topic for another day. But I like yeah, find whatever speed you like for the clickbait solar wind post.
Pretty much.
I think
So we're going with that 1000. Where was
yeah,
that
that
at? Let's see,
1024
1023, something like
spike.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, that
Oh,
was
there it is, right there.
Woo!
See if I can zoom in on it. Oh man, look at that 1025. Ooh, that's not false data. No way. Oof.
yeah, that was pretty wild. But yeah, it's kind of interesting. This should be an interesting declining phase 2 or even the next solar cycle, but because I know Tamitha even alluded that we'll be seeing faster solar wind speeds or from these coronal holes, and we're already seeing it. I mean, this has been kind of hovering in that upper 700 range for, God, what, 24 hours almost now?
And I mean, I'm expecting it to slightly go down a bit, but we're going to have just jumps back into it. There's probably going to be at least two or three different types of forward and reverse shocks just from the shape of the the actual coronal hole, it just drops down south pretty far, but it would still be enough to hit us.
Yeah.
So it's gonna look weird over the next couple of days minimum.
So this will be fun to watch next time it rotates around in 27 days, give or take. See what it gives us next time. Now
Or see if we get maybe a negative one here
maybe
in the
it'll be
next
the
rotation.
whole disc.
Well,
So
that's going to be
legitimately,
the next Corona
the
hole because
decline of
they're.
cycle 24, there was a one that legitimately, like, so this one we have gaps and holes in it. It was legitimately just a open field the entire southern hemisphere that took up almost a quarter of an actual hemisphere as far as the east-west part goes. It was pretty gigantic, and of course the media made a huge deal about that one too. But you should look up a Fox News did a report on it in 2012. I want to say of one of them, and they basically called it a giant hole in the sun. Part of the atmosphere is blown off, and
Oh right.
it was a riot.
Oh my God.
It's like it's gonna eat
May have
us.
got yelled at by the editor chief at Discover magazine for that one.
Oh,
I kind of
well,
called him out.
that's fun. So anyway,
But the
the
next Corona hole that's coming up will be of negative polarity. Right
yay.
now, I think it's on the other side, so we can't see it, but it's coming. We know it's there.
How many days to cross the stream? It was since we saw it. 3 ish. I want to say it was right around that from when we got the and that's about typical. Like once it gets you, actually Space Weather Live sends out little things like when there's a trans-equatorial coronal hole, and then it's usually a couple days after that where we start seeing impact from it.
I
So
usually notice it when it's about one half the way from center disk to the
yeah,
west limb.
Hmm.
because of the way the Parker spiral works, it has to move a little bit out of it'll move a little bit out of view, and then we see the effects from it. But that's because the Parker spiral bends, so that's kind of how that works.
Better with this one since it's so much faster. But yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So yay. But let's see. I think that's all we
Well,
got.
I got nothing else.
Yep.
Let's see. Yeah, unless there's any more questions in the chat, but I think you guys did a good job like addressing them as they came in. So, so I think that's everything. Unless we get another crazy thing to pop up that we need to do another stream on. Actually, we're gonna have Adrian on when we get our schedules to align, so we can discuss this further. You know, our fun with the media. That's what we should just have a segment called "Fun with the Media."
I mean, if you would follow his Instagram, he's been having a lot of fun stories lately about ranting with not only the KP index, using it for visibility for the aurora and its equator word descent, but then also now the RM effect and how the relevance isn't exact, and now that it's more just the radial fields, blah blah blah. But point is, he's been ranting a lot, so I think he needs a vocal platform, don't
Yeah,
you?
he needs to just come on and just let him do his thing, and then we'll just interject as need be, because it's always fun. So on that
And we
note,
we have a stream on Sunday
yeah, we
with
do.
Scott McIntosh. So
Oh yeah, that's going to
Speak.
be relabeled Scott or to a Space Weather Unhinged, just
Yes.
so everybody knows.
Speaking of rant
Just that
sessions,
one.
he's always a riot to come on because he doesn't censor himself ever.
No,
So it'll be fun. The last one we had was a lot of fun. It was like it ended up going like 2.5 hours too, which was
it'll be rated R2.
yep.
so I'll have to put a disclaimer about that one because I try to keep this G rated here. So, but anyway, it looks like so. Thanks again for tuning in, and I'm glad everybody enjoyed the little emergency broadcast. I can't even say it with a straight face.
It is pretty funny. It worked.
So anyway, I'll let you guys go for the night. So again, thanks for tuning in, and as always, if you have any questions, bounce it off of us. We'll be around. We do our best, and don't get deplatformed. We'll try our best. Scott would be the one to get us deplatformed somehow.
Yeah, it's going to be a
Yep.
Scott thing.
But that's
And if he
fine.
does, then whatever.
It
It's
was
fine.
worth it then.
Yeah.
So, all right, I'll let you guys have your night back. So thanks again for tuning in, and if you have any questions, just come find us. We'll be here.
See you, everybody.